Plain Truth, the show where we go into some of the mysteries, anomalies, and the dirty underbelly of the world around us. I'm your host, Paul, and joining us this week, we have Jim Willie, who's editor of the Hat Trick Letter, found on goldenjackass.com. Jim, are you there?
Yes, I am. Good to be back.
Well, thanks for coming. We appreciate it. Well, what's up? How you been?
What's up? Well, it's a sunny day in Costa Rica. It rains in the afternoons usually, but not much. I see the palm trees blowing in the mild breeze. Now, a lot's going on, and you could look around at your environment and see a nice sunny day or a nice autumn day in the United States and think, well, life's good. But the changes globally are at a breakneck speed right now and frightening. Just frightening what's going on. Every single region in the world is in upheaval. I don't think there's a single exception. You could point to Australia and their property, South America with Petrobras and other areas of like Argentina dealing with a lot of problems. Japan with its price inflation and radiation and energy challenges. China with all the explosions, compliments of maybe some foreign hands out of Langley, Virginia. Russia dealing with currency problems and energy income down. Europe dealing with 15 different catastrophic problems. England dealing with so many problems and some increasing awareness that their leadership is truly vile. And the United States, which is, I believe, the center of spreading the global fascism. With a lot of deception in the press. And every region is just upside down. Africa seems to be the most stable. Oh, gosh.
Well, Jim, if you can say that, the world is in deep trouble. Because Africa is just one big mess. I tell you what, why don't we start with our good old friends, the Saudis, because that's the place that I see is just like in over its head. What do you think?
I think the Saudis are facing political tremors right now that indicate that their House of Saud, as I like to call it, is going to fall. I remember the voice told me a year and a half ago, it was early in 2014, he said, look to see the Yemen situation get worse, and as soon as that regime falls, you'll know that there's a clock that starts ticking toward the end of the Saudi regime. And gosh, it was just this week we heard a challenge from some of the half-brothers. The trouble with the Saudi royals is that when it dies, it goes to the power, the scepter of power goes to the next oldest brother among the same family. I mean, among the same mother's children. The trouble is that the king had about 20 different, I don't want to call them wives, more like concubines that accompanied his main wife or main two wives. Or it's pretty hard to say a guy has 20 wives. It's more like he has conjugal relations with over 20 women. It produces a severe problem, though, because they have to deal with half-brothers. And we've got 20 or 30 years where these half-brothers have been segregated. They've been, what's the word? Not shunned, but pushed aside and not included and not really involved in the power game, not really involved in the big wealth sharing, not really involved in a lot of big decision making. Well, now they've run out of strong brothers. First it was Fahd, then it was Abdullah. Well, now Salman is next in line, but he's been diagnosed, and it's widely understood that he has senile dementia. You know, you see a photo of him, and he looks a little lost. He looks like he doesn't have any idea what's going on. even in his photos. His crown prince has been making trips to the Kremlin, I think, to firm up on the new oil regime geopolitically that will be tied in and integrated with the Chinese. We're just weeks or months away from the Saudis and the Gulf Emirates from accepting RMB currency for oil payments. So I had a really good summary given to me by The Voice. It was a result of a conversation, and it went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and we finally came up with a list. Here are the challenges to the Saudi regime. The nation wants Islamic reform. They're tired of all the strict rules. And this goes very deeply and very broadly across their society and business and even political structure. They want wealth sharing. The people are sick of 90-95% of the country's wealth going to an elite group just from a single family or extended family, and you got grandsons on $1 million stipends. I mean, it's ridiculous, the lack of wealth sharing. You've got half-brother challenges who, they look at the last 20 or 30 years and say, okay, now is our chance for some payback. And they're seeing a weak King Salman and the Crown Prince. They're not up to the task of defending against what's coming. And here's the zinger in their society. It's perhaps even more powerful than the very important factor of Islamic reform in their society, and it's the desire to end women slavery.
Well, that would mean
women
ending the
do
current
not
system.
want to be slaves in their society any longer. Wow, this is just very, very big, and I think we're going to see the fall of the House of Saud in the next few months. It was tipped off with the Yemen deal. And let me just add a very important economic point having to do with petroleum and oil. Take a look at the map, and I'll be honest with you. A year and a half ago, I had to look at the map. Where exactly is Yemen? I know it's in the far eastern corner of Africa and somewhat the western end of the Middle East, but where exactly is it? Who are its neighbors? Well, its neighbor to the north is Saudi Arabia. To the south, it's the Arabian Sea. So does it not make sense from a geological point of view that they've got an enormous ocean of oil? So is the Yemen war a power grab by the Saudis to obtain more oil reserves after they've been lying through their teeth for the last 10 or 15 years about their exaggerated oil reserves? I think oil. And in 5 years, you're going to hear a lot of stories about development of the Yemen oil reserves. Very interesting times, but the instability of the Saudis, I think, has a major message. This is a huge group of nails in the dollar coffin. That's the takeaway. And the last point is something that's just nowhere in the news and could be potentially more important than Islamic reform, and that is reform of women's rights, and maybe a better tagline would be the end of women's slavery in the Saudi society. They want more opportunities for business, for education, for living a life, say, without a man. And it's really like the women are dogs on a leash in their society, and it's really quite tragic. I believe it is as important, potentially, as the Islamic reform. But the big issue we need to look at from an economic and geopolitical standpoint is that Yemen, on their neighboring southern border, could probably be loaded with oil. And I'll be honest, I mentioned this before. Take a look at the location of Yemen on the map. It's the southern neighbor to Saudi Arabia. it borders the Arabian Sea. It makes sense geologically that it contains a gigantic pool of oil, crude oil, just like the Saudis. And I believe for the last 10 or 15 years, the Saudis have been lying through their teeth about their oil reserves. I think they've been talking about having spare capacity. And I read things from the oil drum, and I've got one colleague who's very much informed on what's going on with the oil business from the older wells in Saudi Arabia. And what I hear is that the Ghawar well, the Ghawar field, is now producing 97 to 98% water, which means 2 or 3% oil. That's a lot of effort. And they boast about low cost. But if they have this really low cost, but they're only producing 2 or 3% oil, then you need to multiply it by 40 or 50 on that cost. So are they really producing cheaper oil than the Russians? I don't know. So it looks like the Saudi-sponsored war in Yemen is going badly, and the motive might have been from the start to steal Yemen oil, annex the tribal chaotic nation, or whatever you want to call it. I don't know what to call it. I mean, for the longest time we were looking at Somalia and other nations on that Horn area of Africa as really not being governments, being chaotic regions with warlords. So Yemen might not be any different, but it's not going well for the Saudis. I don't think they're going to obtain the Yemen oil. And in 5 years, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised to learn that a major oil-producing region now is Yemen, with the big beneficiary being Chinese. That's what it's kind of the summary of the Saudi situation. I don't think we're going to see King Salman remain on the throne for more than another several weeks at most.
Sense. Well, Jim, for what it's worth, I know an Iranian geopolitical analyst, and his just a few points. He thinks that Saudi oil is in very serious decline. And so, they have 10 years before total catastrophe or something. And that obviously their invasion of Yemen has turned out very, very badly for them. The Yemenis or the Houthis are already inside Saudi Arabia. And the Iranians are backing the rebels, the Houthis. And another point is inside Saudi Arabia, you have Shia regions, and this whole war and ISIS and all that stuff is, meant as a Sunni Shia thing, right? But here you are when your own country has a lot of Shia. And the neighboring Gulf states, there are some Shia regions too. So anyway, the whole area looks like it's about to blow, is I guess what I'm trying to say. And this Iranian fellow I know more or less thinks that that's likely. Whether or not the king goes in a few weeks, the real issue is more what do Russia, China, and the U.S. want to see in Saudi Arabia, I guess is the question. Do you have any brief thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have some general thoughts. It doesn't matter what the U.S. sees for Saudi Arabia because we're not in the business of nation building. We're in the business of nation pillaging. We stole the Arab gold in the Swiss banks. And this is a major event not getting proper press and could have been the trigger for the Saudis moving away from the dollar about a year ago. I mean, a lot of people don't even understand what's going on with the dollar. They say, oh, the dollar's strong, and the morons running, the criminal morons running the U.S. government are saying that the dollar's rising because we have the only economy with growth. No, we're having a dismantled petrodollar. And the dismantling process involves trillion-dollar contracts settling in dollars. So there's this artificial demand. So it has nothing to do with economic strength. The U.S. economy is stuck in this -4%, -5% annual recession, and has been for 7 years since Lehman, or the year before the Lehman event, 2007. So I don't think it matters much what the U.S. wants in Saudi Arabia for, reconstructing, or, this whole Arab Spring. We got to be clear about what Arab Spring is. Arab Spring is destabilize the monarchies, talk a good game about installing democracy, wrecking their infrastructure, stealing their assets, and in particular try to grab their central bank gold. The protector of the Syrian gold at their central bank is the Russian military. The U.S. is not going to be able to steal the Syrian gold. It's about 140 tons, equivalent roughly to what Libya had. They're not going to be able to steal it like they did in Ukraine. Nothing stopped the U.S. and the New York Fed from stealing the Ukraine gold, and they'll never see it again. That was only 33 tons. They will never see it again. The Libyan people will never see it again. And now, it doesn't matter what the U.S. wants to do to reshape the Saudis. We've basically thrown the Saudis under the bus, and they don't want to talk to us anymore. There was an attempt for a meeting, I think in June, where Obama went to Saudi Arabia, and he wasn't even – they didn't even talk to him. I mean,
yeah,
gosh,
that's pretty amazing.
Well, yeah, it shows who has the power, and it shows who's not being respected. This is
Jim.
getting extraordinarily complicated.
Jim, so then a question. Is the U.S. pulling back from the Middle East and maybe even Europe? I mean, is this a huge pullback, not just Saudi Arabia, but just we're getting out of there?
I think we've been bugging out of Saudi Arabia for over a year and replacing our presence with ISIS guerrillas to blow things up. One of the main exports now, and there were some jokes in the last couple of years. What are the chief exports from the United States? Well, there's fraudulent toxic bonds. There's pharmaceuticals, including the GMO foods. There's diabetes. I mean, these are not good things to export. So
high fructose corn syrup.
High fructose, yes, high content corn syrup. I mean, the list goes on and on. So what is the U.S. doing with the Middle East? I don't think we're getting out. I think we're being kicked out. I think we're realizing the failure of the Arab Spring and the backlash. All U.S. government foreign policies in the last several years have involved a monumental backlash. And you saw it with the the Iranian sanctions. When you don't have the theft of the Arab gold in the Swiss banks, which was what UBS and Credit Suisse was all about, find a crime, label it, punish it, take control, and then steal the Arab gold.
Sounds like a plan.
Well, it's very effective, but it has a backlash. They don't like us anymore. And I think we told them, don't complain about this or we'll kill you. Because we have ISIS guerrillas all over the place. The ISIS guerrillas have a lot of Saudi elements. But Putin was quick to point out that the ISIS guerrillas also have some former Soviet Republic guerrillas as elements. And that's why he doesn't like their spread. And he wants to, fix the situation. I mean, I'd like to just make a real quick point about this Russian involvement in the Syrian conflict now. The U.S. military had identified a long list of ISIS targets. It's the Islamic State. And the Russians said, well, if you got all these targets, why aren't you attacking them? And that is the quintessential question. If the U.S. has the targets, why don't they attack them? It's because they're Langley assets. So the whole Russian involvement has brought a new spotlight that the U.S. government does not like. We've been operating with a hidden terrorist arm with ISIS for the longest time now, a couple of years. And it's being exposed as a Langley asset. The intelligence agencies across Western Europe are now becoming a little more clear that the funding and the organization and the weapons provision for the ISIS guerrillas is coming from Washington and their various channels. There was a question a few days ago, how come they have so many nice Toyota trucks? And there was linkage to Langley purchase orders. Let me just move quickly over to another related topic on the Syrian mess. If you're Ahmad, this is how I like to describe it. You're Ahmad, you've got a wife and 2 kids, you live in the suburbs of of Damascus in Syria, and you can't feed yourself. The marketplace has been messed up. The supply chain for food has been messed up. American military drones have wiped out a number of different elements in the infrastructure. This is what we call nation building, and not nation building. It's attacking. We claim that we're attacking the Syrian loyalists to Assad, when what we're doing is we're wrecking the whole economic structure by knocking out bridges, marketplaces. We've even hit some schools. We have accidental drone hits with 200 civilians dead. We don't apologize for anything. But the point is that this is a mess. It's not getting any better. And the U.S. is forcing this tremendous flow of refugees. So Ahmad, his wife, and 2 kids look to get on a ship and go to an Italian port, which is the nearest port. I asked a basic question. Where did Ahmad get the money for his wife and 2 kids, it's a family of 4, to pay for the passage on the ship? Well, the Austrian intelligence, that's as in next door to Germany, not Australia. The Austrian intelligence concluded after their own investigation that it's coming. The funding for passage payments is coming from the U.S. government and their hidden NGO organizations, the non-government, what do you call it, non-government organizations?
Mm-hmm. Non-governmental.
Non-governmental organizations, the NGOs they're commonly called. So why is the United States paying for Ahmad to go to Italy?
Because he's a weapon.
Well, he can be, and for every 100 people that go through, and I doubt they have, all their passports. Are you kidding me? Ahmad and all his friends have passports? Really? They're struggling to survive and to eat the next meal, and they've got passports with proper stamps and photos? I don't think so. So with every 100 good guy Ahmads with the family of 4, there's probably one really scummy guy who's got some connections with, channels for explosives and instructions and that sort of thing. I think this whole Syrian refugee issue is a tremendous smokescreen for upcoming terrorist violence all across Europe.
So is the U.S. kind of at war with Europe?
I wouldn't put it that way. I would say we're trying to make sure that Europe and their economy are equally destroyed as the United States, because they're our partner. Europe is our ally. And notice that the various elements regarding Europe. I have a list here. Yeah, here it is. The Europeans have not objected to the industrial wreckage from the sanctions against Russia. Okay. Why not? It's very destructive to European nations, in particular Germany. So why do they continue with that? They're going along with the mutual destruction. I mean, we used to talk about MAD, mutually assured destruction, in the strategic arms talks with the U.S. versus the Soviets. Well, now I talk about the mutual economic assured destruction from following the U.S. lead. Look at all the environmental damage from chemtrails and fracking in the oil fields. That's going on all across Europe. They're not objecting to that. Look at all the security wreckage with the NATO treaty violations. We just placed a number of ballistic missiles in Germany in direct violation to past treaties, and there's no objection to that. There's no objection to GMO foods from Monsanto all across Europe. There's no objection to the monetary wreckage from QE and all that hypermonetary inflation. The only yakking you hear in objection is from the German central bank, the Bundesbank. You have corporate wreckage with UBS and Credit Suisse, the banks in Switzerland, BNP Paribas, the bank in France, Deutsche Bank, the bank in Germany, and now Volkswagen with what I believe are exaggerated, trumped up, and somewhat fallacious emissions charges that are confusing electric cars, diesel cars, and regular combustion. Gosh, the U.S. just blocked the import of Volkswagen cars that have over 200 miles per gallon that have a very clever carburation system where they inject water, heated water, so it explodes into steam. It seems to me, I haven't given this a lot of investigation, but it seems to me Volkswagen has a hybrid internal combustion gasoline and steam engine. And it gets over 200, 250 miles per gallon, and the U.S. has banned it. Why is that? Is that perhaps because the Rockefellers don't like it? So, you also don't have any objection in Europe regarding the the TPIP, what does that stand for? Transatlantic Trade, no, TTIP, that's it. Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership with Europe. It's a structural fascist integration pact giving extreme powers to the corporation and dispute powers, resolution powers to, again, corporations. And, I believe that there could come a day when the hat trick letter and the Golden Jackass website is found in violation with no due process, and they try to shut it down. I don't know if it's going to actually happen, but theoretically it could. So I think the immigration is being used as a weapon here. At the same time, the European economy is being wasted. How better to install a European and North American trade zone that really is cover for a fascist state than to wreck the economy and say, well, this is necessary. We need martial law. We need, the government to take control. We need the big corporations to help, lift up the whole system. So I think the Syrian refugee issue is infiltration of well-oiled guerrilla machinery. And we're going to see, okay, in just the last couple of weeks, I've probably read a dozen stories of assaults, rapes, and all kinds of street crime going on in Germany and Austria. It's probably other nations as well. And they're being done by these Syrians, these Arabs. I mean, they don't rape someone and leave a little business card saying, you just got raped by somebody who came across a ship from Syria and through Italy, and thanks for the free train ride through Austria. That was really nice of you guys. And where was the hummus when I needed it for a meal? They don't rape and leave an ID. They just rape and leave a memory, a mark, a wound. The street crime violence has escalated to alarming levels, and I asked the question, why are Germany and Austria allowing this to happen unless the main oath they have for the president and chancellor positions is to the U.S. government, and the U.S. government has given them instructions to wreck the nation?
Well, I think that sounds totally plausible. I think there are a couple of other things, though. One is Well, I'll say one thing that was a little speculative. Maybe the agenda was to hype the refugees at the same time that Russia moved in and to blame it on Russia, and that Russia managed to play it well and avoided that. So that's one possibility. But the second one, which is obvious, is they want to destabilize southeastern Europe, Serbia, Greece. It looks to me like they want to blow that whole area up. Well, it's not just
they're
about
destabilizing Germany, though.
Sure, but of course, I'm
and
saying
Austria.
that. Yeah, yes, of course, but I'm
Munich is a mess. There are Arabs living on the street. They're going to turn Germany and Austria into an Arab ghetto.
Jim, I just visited Portland, Oregon, a few weeks ago, and I saw a lot of Muslims there. You know, the scarves and all that, and I'd never really seen that before. You know, it's already coming to the U.S. as well.
I understand that, and I'm questioning the motive. You mentioned that Russia sidestepped blame for the refugee problem, and I don't think there are more than 1 or 2% of the European population that believe that moronic argument of Russian responsibility, nor do I believe that there are many Europeans that believe the U.S. storyline that Russian airstrikes are hitting all the wrong targets. The Russian airstrikes are exposing the U.S. government linkage to ISIS. This is something I've been mentioning for well over a year. And it's funny, I never get any critical email. Now, I'm not talking about the hate mail. I'm talking about, clients saying, I don't understand this, I don't agree with this, I think you might be wrong, a tactful disagreement. I don't hear any of that from clients to the effect that you've got this all wrong regarding ISIS. I mean, there was a leader not a leader, but a ranking officer in Langley who came forward about 4 or 5 months ago to say ISIS is all U.S. I mean, their captains and lieutenants come to Virginia for training.
Wow,
that was a whistleblower event last March or April, and now we're seeing the Toyota trucks coming from Langley funds. And I think if you look closely, you'll see Soros' involvement in there, and just a guess. So, it's a simple conclusion for me. I'm a little simple-minded when it comes to forecast, because I think the more you try to put conventional, complex thinking into it, the more you're wrong. This is a crime scene. We're trying to level the European economy in order to make it more conducive to the fascist state. And we've already seen some big progress in that respect. In the last year, many of the European Union member nations have their presidents or prime ministers or chancellors who take orders from the NATO Supreme Commander. We've actually said, Europe, you're in a state of war with regard to Ukraine, and the Russian sanctions are part of all this. But since this is more like a war zone, we're going to institute kind of a secretive martial law where the NATO commanders are going to give you orders. So if it's not the European Union commissioners who are unelected giving orders to the leaders across the EU member nations, it's the U.S. NATO Supreme Commanders. This is like game over for Europe. You've been captured. You've been wrecked. And now we're putting in hundreds of little terrorist agents. They don't even need cells. They're just going in. I just very eager to hear of when the next string of explosions take place, like in train stations or marketplaces or schools, or main business office parks, and it's blamed on some of these Arabs who've been brought in without proper passport checks. So it's going to get very ugly, I think, and very fast. But I don't think most people see the motives as I do. I see it simply as trying to complete the remainder of the wreckage of Europe. They shouldn't really have Russian sanctions. There was an economic minister in Germany who recently said these Russian sanctions don't make any sense. We need to remove them. Our businesses are being hurt. Our labor market's being hurt. Our export trade is being hurt. And the rest of the Merkel administration shot him down, and not shoot with a gun, shot him down in the argument, saying that's a lunatic argument. Okay, so there's a majority support for the U.S. destructive policies of Germany and Europe. I see a wrecking ball. I see an intentional wrecking ball.
If I may ask, what does the Voice see in all this?
I just gave you a lot of information and arguments, and it's a result of my own thoughts, my colleagues' thoughts, and injected points by the Voice. So everything I've said is consistent with what the Voice thinks. He thinks it's too late, by the way, for Germany. Too late. They cannot rescue their export trade. It's too late. They've crossed the Rubicon with the U.S. support. It's too late to rescue the Russian trade partnership. Too late, because the Russians have turned to Asia and principally China to fill the void. And they're not going to come back to Germany all that readily. That's what his sources are saying. So he's a little bit more focused on how Germany has gone too far. And I disagree a little bit. I think the Russians might come back. I mean, remember I made the point that there are 3,000 to 5,000 German companies doing business in Russia. Well, now they're far fewer. But I think they can come back. And the reason doesn't have to do so much with, easy political alliance between Russia and China. It has to do with really stellar products out of Germany. So will Russia want to get the best in class for products, or will they settle for a very good one made in China? There's a historic link in the last 30, 40 years between Russia and Germany, amazingly. And you have to question, why did Germany have the reunification, East Germany and West Germany? And there was a benefit there for Germany. They had a greater link with Russia. I don't think the U.S. is going to succeed in cutting off Russia from Europe. I don't think so. It's too big. And the workarounds for the Gazprom pipelines I'm not going to say they're easy, but they're viable. And I think they're going to happen. I just don't think we're going to see cutoffs. I think we might even see Ukraine reintegration. And one of the big disappointments I have, you guys, is Turkey. Turkey had the Turk Stream all set up to avoid Ukraine on Gazprom supply from Russia to Europe. And then just suddenly it stopped. And it happened pretty much coincidentally with Turkish full-bore acceptance of U.S. foreign policy with respect to ISIS and Syria. One Syrian neighbor is Turkey. They share a border. So I think Russia's got a strategy of, let Turkey twist in the wind a little bit with their U.S. support. Any nation that allies itself with the United States nowadays seems to be on an economic death march. So.
Well, Turkey's a long topic. They just had this huge bombing in Ankara that has false flag written over it, 100 times in blood. And things are messy. And now I think at the end of this war in Syria, you're going to have Russia turning the Syrian coast into a Russian zone.
Well, they've got the naval port in Tartus.
But it was small. And now I think it'll be big. And I think perhaps more importantly, Latakia is going to be an air base, and they're going to put in all of those usual things that you read about, like the S-300s and all. Anyway, missiles and anti-missile systems.
Well, how do you think that's going to bear on Turkey after Syria becomes a little more planted for the Russians? You think they'll then move toward Turkey and say, time to turn?
Well, I mean, look at a map, okay? Now versus, let's say, 7 years ago. The Crimea is now Russian. And whoever has the Crimea practically owns the Black Sea, right?
Right.
Abkhazia, which was the struggling area in Georgia, is now quasi-independent, but has a Russian, facility there. And now you're talking about right on the border, the southern border, turning it into a Russian zone. And at the same time, at the end of this war, you're going to have all of these crazy ISIS people who are going to have to run back into Turkey. And so Turkey's got a terrible choice. Let them die and not let them in. Or, what? Let them in. And Jim, I think they have lots of problems. I visited there, and there were just lots of homeless, all these poor refugees, crime. A lot of people were very angry with the government for getting involved in the war. And now the Erdogan's declared war on the Kurds. And at the end of this, the Kurdish area of Syria, the northern part of Syria, is going to be like an independent, autonomous region. Anyway, I'm just saying, I think Turkey's got a terrible problem going forward. And it's up to the Russians and the Iranians and what they want to do. But at a minimum, they could give all kinds of weapons and help and intelligence stuff to the Kurds.
Well, this is my point all along. That the Turks made a decision in the last few months to align more closely with the U.S. and follow the policy. So they're going to be facing a wrecking ball, economically and destabilization politically. I hope that there's a regime change in Turkey, and I wouldn't be at all surprised in the next couple of years if there's a lot of debate over the status of their NATO membership. Doesn't make any sense to me why Turkey's in the NATO. None at all, except for proximity to Russia. None at all. So they've got their own problems. The Syrians and Kurds and Turks. I mean, it's a mess. The Iraqis, Syrians, Kurds, and Turks. I mean, how come they don't get along better like New York and Boston? New York, Boston, Philadelphia, and Washington. We get along great, don't we?
Well, as long as you keep 100 miles between them, right?
Yeah, well, I know. Well, that's kind of like what Syria and Turkey have. They have a few hundred miles between them. And Kurdistan and Baghdad, they have a few hundred miles between them.
But I tell you, Jim, here's the difference, though. The difference is at the end of World War I, the people who drew the lines drew it so that half of New York and half of Boston are one country. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know.
And half of Philly and half of D.C. is one country. And so it's like you have to work with people you don't want to work with. And then you get into endless fights over, like, okay, so whose language do we use? Right? The guy on top is going to demand that you do things his way. Right. And anyway, you know this story. But I tell you what, let's move on to China, because I think that's something everybody's interested in. What do you think's going on with China now and this TPP that seems to be moving forward?
Oh boy, I don't know. It seems to me that the Trans-Pacific Partnership just got signed through bribery and lack of debate. It just got, all right, let's sign it. People don't like it, but so what? It's proof that there's no democracy in the United States. I had a list on my, I think it was a September report of various bribes that were paid to U.S. congressional leaders. It's amazing. In Europe, they're doing demonstrations against the trade, the TTIP. In the United States, they're not doing any demonstrations at all. I don't think they understand anything about the trade pacts. So if there's a trade pact that the U.S. signs without debate and Obama using fast-track authority that again is obtained through bribery. Not only is democracy dead, but fascism is rooted. I don't know what these nations are thinking when they sign all along the Pacific Rim. I mean, many people don't even understand it. It involves a lot of the Pacific Rim South American countries. I'm talking about Chile and Ecuador. Not sure about Bolivia, but at least Chile and Ecuador. What are they thinking? I think they might have gotten some narco money as bribes. You can do a lot. I've been talking about narco money, and you know, I'm like the only analyst out there who ever brings it into arguments. I'm amazed. I talk with a couple of other analysts from time to time, and I say, why don't you talk about the narco money? And they say, well, I don't know anything about that. But don't you think it's significant? Yeah, it might be significant, but I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't even touch that. It's very important. I heard that it was the big pharma companies that bribed the congressional members to sign the Asian Trade Pact. Let's just call it that. It's the European Trade Pact and the Asian Trade Pact. I think the Philippines signed shortly after the back-to-back hurricanes that, you know, never happened like that and didn't even happen during hurricane season. So they saw the writing on the wall with the initials HAARP. So, you know, it's a lot of things going on, a lot of moving parts. It seems like the fascist structure is being put into place much like the post 9/11 structure in the United States, so that later they say, well, that's our reality. We can't change that. And when it comes to the Asian Trade Pact, we're going to hear soon, well, that's our reality. People don't like it, but we can't change that. And it's always amazing how it gets put into place, ignoring the popular demands and demonstrating loudly that there's no democracy anymore. It doesn't matter what the people think. It doesn't matter what the people want. It doesn't even matter that the people survive. It just matters that the people act like good goats and sheep. So I don't know exactly what to make of the TPP in Asia and the additional signatories for it, but it has no popular support. I don't think it therefore means it'll go away. I think it'll just become unpopular. So,
well, Jim, a number of countries, I don't think it's so simple to get it through the parliament.
What is after you bribe some of the leaders in the parliament? What are you talking about?
Well, yeah, but the problem is in this particular case, at least in, let's say, Asia, a country like Malaysia or something, or Vietnam, you know, they do a lot more business with China than with the U.S. And so this deal is a big loser in terms of business with China.
Right.
And so, and also, let's face it, China's got $1 trillion sitting around that is just going to be stolen eventually, right? Right? I mean, why not put it to good use and, you know, threaten or buy some politicians?
I think countries like Malaysia and Vietnam who've signed or are about to sign the TPP, the Asian Trade Pact, I think they're going to just say, oh, we'll do whatever you Americans want us to do because we don't want, you know, explosions in our chemical factories and in our train stations. And then they're just going to turn around and continue conducting trade with China. And they're going to earn the U.S. wrath, and the U.S. will say to them, you've got expanding trade with China. We don't like that. And then the Vietnamese are going to say, well, yeah, they're our neighbors. Lip service, well, I'm talking about.
Yeah, of course. The world is full of lip service, so let's. That's certainly a reasonable bet. That's, you know.
Well, if you can do lip service and be paid for it with some little narco money bribes, or corporate bribes from big banks who get free money from the QE, the Fed, or big bribes from pharmaceutical companies, or big bribes from, say, some of the news networks and those conglomerates, or big bribes from, say, a military defense contract, or a big bribe from, say, the Philippines being paid for their military base. That's a bribe of a sort. Well, yeah, lip service with a bribe, and then they turn around and they continue with their trade with China because it makes sense. And the U.S. will be left to threaten them, cut something off, use their money. But as the U.S. starts to use their money more and more on bribery, they're going to realize that their money is not even desired. So that's going to be the big rub that I see upcoming. How do they bribe nations without letting it be known that this is tainted money or this is dirty money, narco money? We got big challenges for nations to avoid being corralled in the dollar, I call it the king dollar court, with narco bribes of their elite, because the leaders of these nations are going to see their economies go to hell while they're continuing to receive the bribes from Washington and New York. And it's going to just go counter. There's going to be a big wake-up day for little countries that say, we can't do this anymore because the dollar is killing our economy.
You know, Jim, you're kind of making me feel optimistic here because do you know who Jesse Unruh was? He was like one of the biggest political figures of California in the last 50 years. And he was
I remember the name. I couldn't tell you much about him, but I always thought he had a funny sounding name. And
that's right. But anyway,
authority. I don't know much about him.
Well, the thing is, some of his quotes are really memorable. And one of them was along the lines of, he was talking about business or lobbying interests. And he said, if you can't drink their booze, screw their women, take their money, and then vote against them, then you got no business in politics. And okay, so
that's pretty. That's plain talk.
That's the U.S. used to be full of guys like that. And anyway, maybe maybe they're doing it to the U.S. maybe the political people in Malaysia or whatever, or Vietnam are just doing the same. So, well,
that's what I call the lip service.
Yeah, that's exactly happy thoughts. But what about other things with China? The gold market, of course, was a big question. Where's that stand?
Well, the gold market is still looking to get more rooted in Shanghai with the demand, and that's coming along quite well. It's really not just 1 or 2 months along. It's a few, and I see the graphs. And I hear the stories, and the word Chindia, the name Chindia has come back. And it's come back in the context of tremendous demand for gold in China and India. Wow, okay. So they've relaxed in India the 80-20 rule. They've relaxed some of the import requirements. So they're bringing in a lot of gold. And the Chinese have always had a lot of demand for gold in the last few years anyway. And it's a remarkable policy that the Chinese government has instituted that encourages their public to buy gold. We're talking about 1.3 billion people buying gold. Well, potentially buying gold. Maybe very small amounts for the poorer people, but they don't go to their banks to buy a CD like mindless Americans do, without realizing that the CD is a donation asset to the bank for unsecured credit. Chinese don't do that. They buy gold coins and little bars and talons, and they got lots of different names, talons and tael, T-A-E-L. I just learned that from a friend that a Chinese tael is like has origin as a little Chinese golden ship, a tiny golden ship. So that was the origin of the word tael, T-A-E-L. But the Chinese are really busy trying to get Shanghai really locked down for the gold integration. And by that I mean not just delivering on gold contracts, unlike the New York and London COMEX, that they don't deliver on gold contracts. I mean, it's one of the biggest, ugly, dirty secrets in all of the Western society. You want to buy a gold contract? Well, fine, but you won't be getting any gold on that contract, which is a contract violation that's never enforced. The Chinese have, through Shanghai, been setting up their gold contracts priced in RMB and delivered in physical metal and gigantic volumes. And I've been asking questions the last several months, where's all the volume coming from, the supply of gold coming from, to satisfy all these Chinese contracts? And the answer I get is, well, there's some new channels in the last few years. And here's one of them. There's several, but here's one of them. The Congo. You can call it whatever you want. People's Republic, the Democratic Republic of Congo. I just call it Congo. You can change the clowns running it, but there's still Congo in the name. Well, they call that now a distress zone. Congo and a couple neighboring nations are producing gold, and they're all in deep trouble politically, and it's not a good place where you want to walk around with a white face and some good boots. There's a lot of criminal activity there, a lot of murder, a lot of genocide. I once saw a picture of 2,000 dead bodies, and a lot of them were burned. Just laid them all out in columns lying down. This is typical of Congo, and this is what you get with the Western colonialism, where the Belgians went in there and messed things up. I don't want to get into a long discourse of how they mess things up, but when you kill the king and work out a bunch of contracts for the Western corporations, and at that time London-based corporations, they basically sold out the country, wrecked the structure of the country, and allowed for a lot of mineral exploitation. And in the last few years, I'm hearing, on the order of 1,000 tons a year coming out of Congo alone of gold. And neighboring countries, probably very similar, maybe not quite so much. I once saw a map comparison. It was an amazing little story. This is about a year or two ago. It just showed Western Europe, the little countries of Western Europe, all packed into the Congo. Congo is as big as all Western Europe. So it's a very big area. And here's the linkage with the BRICS. It used to be BRIC. And then it had the S added to it of South Africa. And I asked questions long time ago. I don't understand why is South Africa in the BRICS? I don't see that. They're not Asian. They don't really have much in similarity with Brazil and Russia and India and China. And finally the voice gave me the answer. He said, Jim, it's kind of simple. It's gold. And in the last few months, he said, it's kind of simple. It's the Rand refinery. So the BRIC included South Africa in order to include the Rand refinery, which has tripled the output in the last couple of years in South Africa, even though their mining output is down every single year. So the big question is, where is all this gold coming from to be refined? And the answer is the distress zones of Africa, in particular Congo. So Congo is sending their gold, I think, through Dubai in the form of Dory bars, which is, just think of it as basically 90% gold that has yet to be fully refined. So the Dory bars go through Dubai, United Arab Emirates, and find their way to South Africa, Johannesburg, and all the different refineries that they have with the Rand refinery. And where's the destination after that? China. So China might have arranged for South Africa to join the BRIC, to become BRICS, in order to get the gold. And I have other theories regarding South Africa and the gold and later down the road some Chinese labor in order to reopen the marginal South African, very deep and difficult mine shafts. That has to be done more in secrecy. But I don't think secrecy is a very difficult thing in today's day and age. So what's going on with China? A lot of things. I look, for instance, at some of the big increases, like toward 8% now in Chinese RMB being used in trade. They're seeing really nice leaps in RMB usage in trade settlement. We're also seeing some leaps, not as big, but in RMB bonds used in global banking system reserves. So China's using this time, using these delays, and a lot's going on. Just so much is going on, and you take a look at the press, the financial press, and they got all the wrong stories for emphasis about housing market rebound, U.S. economy doing reasonably well, the labor market seeing remarkably low unemployment. All these are wrong topics and full of lies and deception. I mean, sure, the percentage of people receiving state unemployment insurance is going down. That doesn't mean unemployment's going down. We get all the wrong stories with emphasis. QE is actually succeeding, and since it's been such a resounding success, they're thinking of pulling back. My gosh, we went through taper talk in 2013, but we just had another stupid episode of taper talk in the last few months. I had a number of clients, like 20 clients, write me a few weeks ago saying, good call on no rate hike. And I said, was there ever any doubt? What, are you brain dead? I don't say brain dead to clients. I say brain dead, in a third person way when I'm talking with friends and colleagues. Are they brain dead for thinking such? Yeah, they're brain dead. Either brain dead or completely bought off in Wall Street. You got to sell a line of bull in order to continue with the dollar. Oh gosh, the King Dollar's court now is being defended by military and lies and fraud. It's sad what's going on. I mean, I moved to Costa Rica because I saw all this coming. And people say, how could you possibly have seen it coming way back in 2007? I said, well, easy. I saw the housing bubble, and I thought, well, once that goes, they're going to have to go to 0% and print money just like the Japanese, and it's going to be a wrecked economy. Oh, the U.S. will never do that. And that's exactly what they did. So I foresaw a lot of these things when I made a vote with my feet. But there's really no real safe place to live or stand or operate.
Yeah, it looks like everything's going down.
Well, that's how you bring about the global fascist state. Make sure, their objective is make sure the global economy is wrecked. Get everybody to sign on to the dollar, and it's nothing but a 1,000-pound millstone around a tribe's necks. Down they go. Oh, but we were loyal to the dollar. How come our economy is ruined? Because you were loyal to the dollar. And the dollar's not sound money.
Yeah, what can you say? What about just on the more physical side of the gold market? I mean, people buying and selling and premiums and things like that. What do you see in that world? Is it going dry at the high end?
It's going dry at every end. There are three real interesting points on the structure of the gold and silver retail market now. Not so much retail market, the gold and silver physical market that's mostly driven by retail. Here are the three factors. These are all new. And I think since they're all new and since they're all strong factors, they're going to have a very big impact on changing the market. And what I mean by that is giving the final death blow to the COMEX. Okay, here are the three. We're seeing ripe, really high premiums being paid for recent coins. They're called mint coins because they're only a few years old. It's not like you have a 100-year-old Morgan silver dollar. No, it's like you've got a 2004 American Silver Eagle or Canadian Maple Leaf. 2004, 2003, 2006, 2007. They're being treated like collector's items now. They're being given an extra premium above and beyond what, say, a 2-year-old coin from 2011, 12, or 13. So a distinction of just the past decade. Think of it that way. The 2000 decade, they're given collector item status. That's new. That was never seen before. A couple of years ago, you had a 2005 coin. It had pretty much the same price as a 2011 coin. Not true anymore. Okay, that's the first point. The second point is what they call the live market. Suppose you want to go out and get 20 1,000-ounce silver bars. You want 20 of them. And you're going to pay up. You want them. You need them. You need them in the next 2 weeks. You need them now. You need them. And you're willing to pay up. Well, the live market used to go above the spot. And it used to be, like 10, 15, 20% above spot to get it and to get it fast. The live market's gone dry. They're now saying we can't get it at any price. Or we can get it and it's an outrageous. It's like, 50% premium. And so they essentially have gone dry. That's new. Not seen before. The live market always had supply before. And the issue was, well, how much is the premium now? Has it gone outrageous, or is it just, like 12.5%? Okay, the third point has to do with the silver recycle. I remember just looking over lots of different graphs in several years. Where's the silver supply coming from? And you have the mining interests, you have melt of junk silver, and you've got a few others, and they're small. But the junk silver meltdown was always, it seemed like 12 to 20% of the supply chain for silver. Not anymore. Not anymore, because the way they operated that business of what they called the silver recycle was they would take the spot price and subtract 10 or 15% from it. And that would be the profit margin for those who were able to collect on the junk silver. That's all gone away. The silver recycle has gone away because the price given to junk silver has a premium, not a discount now, a premium to the spot price. So they're paying the spot price plus 10 or 15%. It's gone the other way around, and an entire channel heading toward the refineries from the junk dealers is gone. It's all gone. And the refiners are paying up. The refiners are paying the premium because the refiners are running out of supply. That's new. It's very new. Those are the three main factors that I see that are driving the structural elements of the gold and silver market. And most of them have to do with silver confirming a belief I've had for several years that when the gold and silver market breaks, it'll be silver and its hammer that breaks it. And we're starting to see that now. The live market is dry on silver. The recycle market is dry on silver. The big premiums for mint coins from the last decade are mainly for silver. Very interesting. And now a new phenomenon, another new phenomenon. The U.S. is now importing rather substantial amounts of silver to India. which begs all kinds of questions. Why would the U.S. do a favor to India like that? Why don't they just say, hey, sorry guys, but there's no silver and you're going to have to deal with shortages over there? Could it be that India did some big favors for New York and London in past years? And this is payback time, calling in on some of their chips, their favor chips. That's what I think.
Yeah, it makes
That's
perfect
what I
sense.
think. Remember the stories back in 2004 and 5 about India doing a sale with the IMF of gold, all within the provisions of the Washington Accord? And later we came to learn that it was just a bunch of BS and book entry changes. So it looked like what happened was India sold, or leased its gold to the IMF. And then in 2003, they went along with the BS story of how India would be selling their gold. And all they really did was they said, we don't want our gold back. We will sell what we already leased to you. So there was no movement of gold from one office or nation to another. There were just book entries that what was leased is now sold. And they made a big deal about the sale, and oh yeah, no one really likes gold now. These are all the propaganda stories surrounded by the IMF. All right, I think this is related somewhat to the rather high volume that's just seen in the last couple of months that SRS Rocco exposed to me, and through his analysis, which is always excellent. Just the last couple of months, not years, months, there's been a rather significant U.S. export of silver to India that was not there before. So it's like a chart where there's 0, 0, 0, and then 2 big months. Well, what's that all about? I think it's favors called in. And I believe, I was told years ago, I mean, we were told that there's a tremendous amount of, there's a tremendous silver shortage in the market, but it just doesn't seem to come anywhere near default status. Where are the hidden supplies of silver coming from? And I always heard 2 places, the Vatican and India. So I think we're seeing some repayment from favors in the past to India.
Makes perfect sense. Hey, before I forget, and before we wrap it up today, what about the whole idea of a global currency reset? You've talked about that a few times. Do you have any thoughts on where that stands?
Well, you can't really make a phone call and find out.
No, you can't. Unless you're some wild, crazy analyst. Normal people have to just read the tea leaves.
Well, here are my thoughts, and I have a joke. Once in a while, I don't use this joke a lot, but once in a while I'm either tired or a little impatient, or I get tired of 2 types of questions. When will this happen, whether it has to do with gold price or some event? When? What month do you expect it'll happen? Because no one knows. And the other one is, what are the details behind the reset? And my sassy answer that I give once in a while is, why don't you call up the New York banks? They have a special number. It's 1-800-LUCIFER. Find out.
Yeah, of course, but the chair is empty. No, just kidding.
Well, I think the chair is full. I think it's got a rotating bunch of chairs, and if it's not occupied at the time, it's probably because they're busy down in the basement drinking some kid's blood. I mean, I had an interesting discussion with a family member a few months ago, and he said to me, Jim, I don't believe there's any Satanism in the world. Isn't that just for the movies? Woo! No, it's all through the banks and political leaders, I'm afraid. It's not complete, but all right, what is going on? I don't. The quick answer and the honest answer is I don't know. I can only speculate. I've got some ideas. I've got some viewpoints. And it's impossible to know the actual answers. But it looks like a lot of things happened a few months ago when the IMF made a decision to reverse on their decision made previously for inclusion of the RMB in the special drawing rights for International Monetary Fund and their basket of currencies. And the four currencies in the baskets are the major forex currencies of the dollar, the euro, the pound, and the yen. I don't know the exact date. I mean, a while ago I did, but I think it was somewhere around April. The IMF made a decision to back out. Maybe it was May, right around there. The RMB was told, you're not ready for prime time yet. And at first I thought, okay, the Chinese are going to be really angry at this. This is a betrayal. But I'm coming to learn that it might have been a mutual decision and agreement, because the Chinese might have realized we don't have enough RMB-based bonds seeded across the major banking systems. We don't even have enough RMB bonds ready to be seeded upon agreements to put them in the global banking systems of various nations, like 30 nations across the world. And the Chinese might have also said, we're really not ready with the structures involved, the offices and windows, to make the yuan, the RMB, ready for globalization, internationalization. They use the word internationalization of the yuan as a catchphrase a lot. And part of that has to do with the lack of RMB being used in trade. And now it's up to near 8%, maybe it's 7%, but it's right in that area, 7 or 8%, and it's moving up. But it's got a long way to even remotely challenge the US dollar, which is somewhere around 60%. So it's 8 times lower than the dollar for trade settlement. So from inadequate trade settlement in RMB and inadequate seeding in the global banking system in RMB bonds, it's just not ready. And one of the hate mails I got that kind of ticked me off about a week ago was, look at that, Jim. Your shitty analysis full of holes is now saying the Chinese and Americans have made a year delay for the reset. Isn't that convenient? Doesn't that really expose the lack of value to all of your work? No, it doesn't. Not at all. It exposes the ignorance of the fool who wrote the email. You can't have IMF integration of the RMB unless there's sufficient volume to integrate in the RMB. And I thought they could do it more quickly, but apparently I didn't understand that it had to grow more before it could be properly integrated. So that's what they're doing. And the U.S. always likes a delay because it gives them more opportunity to print trillions and to cover oil hedges that are costing Wall Street the trillions, and to keep the interest rate derivative machinery going to produce trillions of artificial treasury bond demand. Notice that the U.S. treasury bonds have almost no buyers, yet there's $1 trillion in deficit every year, and the interest rate does not go higher. The bond yield does not go higher. In Greece, it did. And we're also seeing tremendous amount of dumping by certain nations. And it was 3 months in a row China dumped $100 billion, but last month apparently they dumped only something like $40 billion. Okay, they might have said, they might have said to the United States, you get the idea of what we can do, so let's be a little bit more cooperative. And there's still explosions of chemical plants in China, so there's still a lot of moving parts. I don't know exactly what's going on with the reset, and I don't think it has anything to do with the Iraqi dinar and the Vietnam dong. Those are opportunities for people to throw their money away, because Hillary and Geithner and Paulson and Rubin, they all cashed in on the Iraqi dinar investments. They made their money and they walked away. And these people do not get their money off the table when there's more to be made down the road. So we're left with only the fools in the room on that. The global currency reset, in my opinion, is a gigantic misnomer. This is a movement and an international agreement to reinstall gold as the center for the banking system reserve system. And they will do that, I think, in a sequence of steps. I just had an interesting discussion with a smart friend of mine yesterday. We had lunch, and I said, I think we're going to see the banks buy a lot of gold and put them in their reserves right before the gold price is declared higher, just like Roosevelt did. I think the global currency reset is a recapitalization of the global banking system with a core of gold, but to be done with a cheaper price. And as soon as it's done, they're going to double the gold price. It's like instant recapitalization of the global capital in the banking system. Hard not to stumble over some of these words. So take a backward look at it. All right, well, if they're going to reduce the currency value in gold terms, they're going to increase the gold value in the paper currency terms. So that's what I think the reset is all about, and that's why I think there's a delay. The Chinese need more time to set up the platforms and the internationalization of the yuan, RMB, and the Americans always love an opportunity to maybe start another war and destabilize another nation, steal their gold, and, rape and pillage. U.S. is nothing like the nation it was when I was young. Nothing.
Wow. I think that's pretty clear. It's in my mind, it's gone mad.
In the minds of 90% of the American public, I don't think they see it that way. They just see, well, there's some problems that need to be addressed.
I look at things and just see insanity. I really do. I think the leaders are insane. And I think you see it all across the board. You see it with these bogus stories and events,
well, you could say insane, but I would say it's different. It's not insanity. It's vile motives. When Joseph Biden, vice president, delivered a commencement address at the U.S. Air Force Academy in May of 2014, I was shocked. I turned on the YouTube and watched it to a crowd in full applause. He talked about the installation of the New World Order to full applause. So the fascist state is not adequately described as such to the American public. And really, do the Air Force cadets want to go out and throw in jail American citizens who don't want to follow some of the fascist orders? Are they going to go out and round up people for the FEMA camps? Are they going to install the guillotines within the FEMA camps? Are they going to just go in there and clean out all the street people and help them along into the Langley human organ black market business? I mean, is this what we've become? Applause for the New World Order speech by Biden. And I asked my brother, what'd you make of the Biden speech speaking with praise of the New World Order? And he said, I don't know. I don't know. Okay, so people who have economics degrees, educated people, they don't know anything about what's going on. They're too busy with their families. They're too busy with their businesses.
But Jim, that's part of the madness. I'm saying that there's like insane hubris. The people at the top pretty soon are going to start, making their horses senators, or I would say I would start talking about other ugly topics, like bestiality or something, but that's actually now out in the open. So It's not even conspiratorial anymore.
Well, you know, it could get so crazy that two men could be living as a married couple in the White House.
Yeah, I mean, you never know. It could get so crazy that there could be, a couple where the first lady's named Michael or something. Yeah, it's quite a world we live in. And anyway, that's what I'm trying to say. And I think this is relevant whether you're talking about relations with China or the Middle East or, Germany and Europe. Is I just see insane hubris where they've lost the thread. I don't know. Just put it this way. You were saying how the country is not what it was. Well, I remember the bad guys, people like Kissinger and Brzezinski and, I don't know, Jim Baker. But at least I thought they had some touch with reality. Ugly, maybe, but realpolitik. And I don't know. I just feel like the whole system's dysfunctional now, and it's got people who are lightweights compared to those old evil criminals of the past.
And I point to a seminal date for that craziness to take root, and that was 9/11. And I point to another seminal date where it went to a new level of desperation, and that was the Lehman Brothers incident of September 2008. And I point to another date where it went insane, and that was the QE to infinity admission back in late 2013 with the end. When Taper Talk got dismissed, to me, that was the start of QE to infinity. And there are lots and lots of individual milestone events, but those are the three big ones: 9/11, Lehman, and QE to infinity. And really, what is this? Well, if a book is written of that era, it is 9/11 started the fascist business model in the U.S. political structure and economic structure, the fascist business model. And now we're seeing the insane hubris, which is governing over the wrecking field full of the bitter fruit from the fascist business model. And we're not seeing movement toward reform. We're seeing more desperate, crazy moves like lassoing Volkswagen and giving them a bogus, absurd $18 billion fine, intentionally perhaps confusing the gasoline, diesel, and electric standards for emissions. I mean, it's gone crazy. It's gone wicked insane. And I stick with my guns. We're trying to wreck the European economy. We're trying to wreck the entire Middle East. It's what we specialize in as a nation. Wrecking balls. Arab Spring was to install democracy in Arab nations? Are you kidding me? How stupid is that? There's not a single foreign policy success by the Obama administration now in its, sixth year? Not a single success in foreign policy. Yet he comes up with a new one. I don't think it's out of his cranium, cerebrum. I think it's handed to him as the next chapter for a destructive sequence. It's sad what's going on. It is insane hubris, but it's laced in with the desperation to keep the king dollar court in movement and the fascist business model operating. I mean, I had a funny little conversation a while ago, and it had to do with, well, why is there all this cost overrun for the new, I don't know the exact name, but it's not the F-22. It's the next one, I think, for the U.S. military Air Force jet fighter. Why are there all these cost overruns? And apparently it doesn't even have some of the good qualities of the F-15, F-16. And the answer that I got back from the voice was, quality is not important. The important thing is to keep the funds going into the military complex. Quality is not an issue. It's just keeping the machinery going and the movement of money, in particular, not just the U.S. military complex, but the complex for the little nation on the southeast corner of the Pacific. It seems to run our foreign policy more than it really should out of the Council of Foreign Relations. So the desperation is all over the place to keep the system going. What can we do now that will require extraordinary measures and actions to keep it going? Okay, how about if we lasso Volkswagen and give a message to the German economy and the industrial sector there that they have to stay in the dollar sphere? Okay. Oh, what's the blowback going to be from Germany? And how long will it be before the blowback comes? Because I guarantee you there will be some that comes. The Germans are stout people. They're not going to tolerate this much longer. They're not going to want to see their nation wrecked, and they're not going to want to see their streets overrun with Syrian refugees where their women get attacked and raped. They're not going to do it. So how long will it be before Germany says we've had enough? I don't know. I don't have the answer. And if people ask me, when do you think that'll happen? I'll say, I don't know. Call 800 Lucifer and ask Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan, whoever picks up.
Yeah, they certainly seem like they're on the same team, if not.
Well, let's not leave out Bank of America and Citigroup.
Hey, Bank of America, have you seen their headquarters, on 33 Market Street or whatever, a big pyramid? Yeah, I think they don't get left out in the plot, so to speak. Well, Jim, I tell you what, we've had you for a long time. Why don't we call it a day and give your throat a break? And before we leave, could you remind our listeners of your letter, your website, and any other details that you'd like to?
My throat is actually doing pretty well. Yesterday was a very difficult day. I was coughing for most of the afternoon, clearing up a bunch of junk in the bronchial tubes, and I don't know exactly what that was all about. Maybe it's final phase, but I'm doing okay now. I just got tired from all the coughing. Anyway, doing okay, and I invite people to check out the website where the Hat Trick Letter has home. I'm the editor of the Hat Trick Letter. It's found on www.goldenjackass.com. I invite people to go to the website, and you'll see a rather long list of interviews in the last few years. I tend to do 2, 3, 4 a month. I did 7 last month. That was amazing. It could be a little tiring, but I got to switch gears and go from interview mode to report writing mode and the analysis, because that's the core of the business, the newsletter. But go to the free page and you'll see a lot of public interviews and about 1 a month for public articles, written articles. I like to do 1 a month. I like to write. I like the expression, just to explain complex topics and put a little humor in, put a little, barbs in there.
Sarcasm is the word, Jim.
Yeah, I know. I don't like the word sarcasm. I learned
I'm
a
getting
while
too
ago.
close to home.
Well, yeah, okay. But here's the origin of the word sarcasm.
Uh-huh.
It's a Greek word that means ripping and tearing of flesh.
Well, that's why I like it when you use it.
Yeah, I know, but it's a nasty word. It's just me. I try not to use the word. It's a real deep word. I tend to reserve it for my family members. But anyway, there's a public article once a month or so, and I look to see, well, what's the big important issue of the day. And for a while it was QE to infinity, and then recently it was $1 trillion a month of hidden QE volume to cover the Wall Street bank losses for oil hedges and more. Petrodollar machinery being dismantled with losses. But bounce around there, look at the free material, and sign up for the Hat Trick Letter. I got another couple clients in the last few weeks And one guy wrote and said, Jim, I'm exactly what you described. I've been following your work for a couple of years, and I decided to sign up. You mentioned on a radio interview that people who delay on signing up usually regret their delay. And now I know what you mean. I signed up. I've been looking at a couple reports, and I regret waiting and just living off, the free material of public articles and the more frequent radio shows. And I'm amazed at how you put things together. And one of the high praise catchphrases that I hear is, you do really well connecting the dots. And I say, well, thanks. I like looking at events, looking at the timing, and seeing how things might be related simply because they're important, they involve billions, and they have good timing and sequence. So maybe there's more to it than we see originally, and then as the months pass, we see more linkage. But go to goldenjackass.com, bounce around, sign up for the newsletter, and you will not be disappointed. I have a number of people. I mean, it's like hundreds of people who they might be subscribers from 2007, 8, 9, and 10, and they backed out, and they just got back on and say, I missed the newsletter. I missed not knowing what's going on and not seeing the linkage. It's the dot connecting again. So those are some of the compliments that I really enjoy reading. And, a guy in my position has got to grab at the little satisfactions along the way, because this is hard work. It's messy work. And it's not like I'm writing and smiling and saying, oh, this is wonderful. This is wonderful. No, it's ugly. It's nasty. This is a newsletter that points out a lot of integrated nastiness and evil, destruction. This is not love, peace, and integration of good things. The U.S. dollar is an instrument of destruction, toxicity, and wreckage. And the nations that embrace it to the end will see their economies destroyed and will see civil disorder on their streets. The nations of the world are going to be in a very big challenge soon to come up with a legitimate currency to avoid what's going on in, say, Venezuela. Venezuela is your laboratory visible experiment room. If you don't come up with legitimate currency, if you don't clean up your socialist moronic structure where you support the workers support the non-workers, and after a while you have more non-workers than you have workers. That's what's happening in the United States now. The majority of the votes for Obama came from people who really just can't get along. They voted for hope and change, hope that someone will take care of me. All right, these nations are going to be in a challenge to come up with a legitimate currency, gold-backed. Panama's got a little different idea. They can have a gold and copper-backed currency called the Central American dollar. There's lots of innovative ways that nations are going to adapt to the crisis that comes. The unavoidable aspect is the crisis will come because the dollar is a dead end. And we're seeing it all over the place.
Well, you got that right, I think. I think we're looking at a mess. But when it'll happen, could be tomorrow, could be a few years from now. Anyway, Jim, thanks so much for coming. We appreciate it. Till next time.
It's a pleasure being on. I wish you all the best. And, gird your loins. This is hurricane time. People are going to be blown away. Their wealth is going to be blown away unless they're holding gold and silver, and they must be careful where they're holding it. All right, so it's a pleasure being on. Thanks for having me.
Okay, folks, it's a wrap.